This is PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Daily. I'm Dan Mannarino. It is July 14th, and we're talking about the race for New York City mayor, which is taking a lot of interesting turns over the weekend. So in case you missed it, let's begin with what came out this morning, which is a brand new poll from the New Data for Progress. Put out this poll, which shows that the Democratic nominee, Zohran Mamdani, is far and away running away with this at 40%. Followed by independent and former Governor Andrew Cuomo, 24%. Mayor Adams, the current mayor of the city of New York, who's running on an independent line with 15%, followed by the Republican nominee, which is Curtis Sliwa, at 14%. Now, the reason I bring up this poll in particular is because of what developed over the weekend. Sources telling me close to the Andrew Cuomo campaign that he is actually going to move forward, announcing this week that he's going to mount a run for the independent line. I got a lot of questions about this, right? Who are saying, well, I thought he was already running as an independent. Let me be very clear. All of these names I just mentioned are going to be on the ballot in November, right? Because they passed the filing deadline. There's no way they can drop out and change. So all those names will appear on a ballot. The question was, are they going to actually mount a campaign and try to beat Zohran Mamdani? So what my sources were telling me close to the Cuomo campaign is that he is going to mount a campaign. He's going to announce it later this week with a caveat, which may sound familiar. It's a proposal that former Governor David Paterson came out with last week that do a poll in September and see who out of that group is the front runner, Zohran Mamdani excluded, out of Eric Adams, Curtis Sliwa, Jim Walden, and Andrew Cuomo. See who is leading. That person, then everybody coalesces around and supports, and that person challenges Zohran Mamdani. That's what Andrew Cuomo says he wants to go ahead and do. Will everybody listen? Are they going to agree with that? Eric Adams says no. And when I spoke to Curtis Sliwa, he said absolutely not. And the reason is because they're all going to be on the ballot anyway. And if you drop out of the race and don't actually mount a campaign, you have to give back a lot of your matching funds that you got through the campaign finance boards. There's a lot of intricacies that go through this. Plus, a couple of sources were telling me, why would they, right? A poll in September is not a poll in November. And if the polls told you anything about primary day, is that they were all wrong. Nobody had Zohran Mamdani winning on primary night. Our poll with Emerson College was the closest that had Zohran Mamdani winning in the final round, but nobody had it in the first round. So a lot of these arguments can be made of why should we listen to polls come September? So we shall see what plays out with that. But I did speak to Democratic strategist Trip Yang about what this really means for Andrew Cuomo, how he has to look at the numbers, what would he have to do to pull off a win since he did lose, and what's happening to some of his big-time donors, big-time supporters who have already moved on. They moved on to Zohran Mamdani. So here's what he had to say. So this was an interesting turn of events over the weekend, right? Now, we always knew Andrew Cuomo was going to be on the ballot because he told me I'm going to be on the ballot in November. But after what happened on primary night, he wasn't sure he was going to actually mount a campaign. But there's a caveat with this, and that's this September poll thing. You kind of lay that out and what it all means.
So it's a little bit hypocritical here for Andrew Cuomo because 12 years ago, in September 2013, when Bill de Blasio won the Democratic nomination, then Governor Cuomo actually presided over a press conference on the steps of City Hall, encouraging the state Democratic Party to corral and unite behind the Democratic nominee. So for Andrew Cuomo, 12 years later, to run as an independent and to seemingly actively campaign fundraise for this third-party independent challenge against Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, it's a little bit, well, the height of hypocrisy, once again, for Andrew Cuomo, given his past.
So here's the thing, Trip. He's saying, though, that he would like to, or what we're being told of what this announcement is going to be is, yes, I'm going to run, but in September, there should be a poll. This is what Governor Paterson said last week, former Governor Paterson. There should be this poll in September. Whoever is the front runner among the three independents and Curtis Sliwa, that person should go up against Zohran Mamdani. Everybody else should drop out, and that includes himself if he's not the person that they chose.
It sounds good in theory. However, one, Mandani is leading in the polls in the general election. Two, most registered voters in New York City are registered Democratic voters, and most Democrats automatically support the Democratic nominee. And three, crucially, while this plan amongst these anti-Mamdani forces sounds good on paper, in reality, it's hard to find a set of three more stubborn people in New York than Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, and Curtis Sliwa. So I don't know if it'll actually happen in reality.
And there also is Jim Walden, who technically is still on the ballot, even though he was polling around 1%. But here's the thing. If say, Andrew Cuomo does lead that poll in September, who's to say? Curtis Sliwa says, I'm not going anywhere. Eric Adams says, I'm not going anywhere. And Curtis Sliwa brought up a good point. If you do technically drop out, you got to give back all your money.
That's a really, really good point. Curtis Sliwa has run for mayor before. He got wiped out, coincidentally, by Eric Adams in 2021. Seems to be a gadfly candidate, very stubborn. Sounds like he'll want to go to distance. Eric Adams, on the other hand, his negative approval rating is really, really bad. It's actually much worse than these other candidates. But Eric Adams has a lot of fire in his belly. Sounds like he wants to go to distance. So once again, I don't know if this plan that Cuomo has will actually go to distance.
So what does it mean for Andrew Cuomo, though, when you look at some of his past supporters for the primary? Reverend Al Sharpton asked Cuomo to step aside, right? Congressman Andrew Cuomo endorsed Mandani. And now you have unions that were once supporting Andrew Cuomo in their primary going towards Mandani.
Yeah, Cuomo's coalition is already fracturing. His endorsers, labor unions like HTC, 32BJ, that have endorsed him in the primary have already endorsed Mandani. You've mentioned some strong leaders there as well. And some of his financial backers are already going to Eric Adams. So if Andrew Cuomo is actually going to make a run at this in November, he has to campaign with a lot more gusto. He has to make a lot more media appearances, actually answer questions that reporters give him, actually campaign to voters. Because right now, the political support and the financial support for him in the general does not appear to be the same as it was for him in the primary.
People criticized the way he campaigned, right? Saying that he was kind of hiding, didn't really go to appearances, did very few media interviews. He did come to us a few times. But when you look at how he has to do this for the general, and not just him, any of them, are they pulling support from each other? And that's why they're saying coalesce, meaning is Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo splitting the vote? And if one of them drops out, could they beat Mandani?
Theoretically, Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, of course, are both registered Democrats choosing to run against the Democratic nominee on a third-party line. Historically, they've both done well with outer borough voters, black voters, some Jewish voters as well. So on paper, and in some pre-primary election polling, it seems like Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams do share a similar base. They seem to pull each other. Sliwa, on the other hand, he is definitely the Republican in the race. I don't know if Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams are actually going to get Sliwa's Republican voters unless someone like Donald Trump encourages them to do so. So, look, it really is set up for Zohran Mamdani, who's the big winner from the primary, to have an even bigger win come November.
Help me understand the voters here, right? Because Zohran Mamdani did something that no other candidate has ever done. He brought out the most voters on a primary day in history. And Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo are already saying, well, that was just 1 in 3 Democrats, not really a wider swath of the Democratic Party. Is that true?
Zohran Mamdani has enormous momentum. In modern New York City history, what Zohran Mamdani did, which is get 18 to 39-year-olds as the highest voting demographic, the highest voting segment, is unprecedented in modern New York history. It's usually middle-aged and senior voters who vote at higher levels in a local primary. Zohran Mamdani also got over 40,000 new voters for the first time in a Democratic primary. And so in the general election, yes, the electorate is larger. However, Zohran's momentum from the primary absolutely translates over to the general.
And if you're Mayor Eric Adams and you're looking at this last poll that came out last week from Slingshot Strategies, it showed Mamdani, then it showed Cuomo, then it showed Curtis Sliwa, and then in 4th place was Eric Adams. So for him, what does he have to do? Because he's right now behind even the Republican nominee.
I will give Eric Adams credit that he seems to actually relish campaigning much more than Andrew Cuomo. He seems to like to be on there in the campaign trail, likes to be competitive with Mandani. But it seems like the hole is just way too big for the mayor to dig out of. I would advise the mayor to update his resume in a couple months.
But should he drop out?
That's a decision for him to make. You know, in democracy, anyone can run for office. I actually don't think Mayor Adams electorally will be a factor in November.
And just to be very clear for everybody at home, because this is where it gets really confusing, even if, say, they drop out or don't mount a campaign, their name is still on the ballot in November. So when you go to the ballot box and you see Andrew Cuomo or Mayor Adams or Curtis Sliwa or Jim Walden, their names are all going to be there because it's past the time. Yeah. Does it confuse a voter?
There sometimes has to be a little bit of voter education that when someone's name is on the November ballot, they are an option. However, realistically, if a campaign and a candidate are not actively fundraising, spending millions of dollars on TV ads, getting their name and their message out there, actively talking to voters and media reporters, realistically, most of the time, if they're not doing that but their name is still on the ballot, their support naturally, organically drops down to very low single digits.
Okay, this is why it's a roller coaster of a ride, and you never miss a minute in New York City politics. Trip Yang, great to have you here this morning.
Thank you.
All very interesting from what Trip Yang had to say, and our Henry Rossoff, political reporter, is following this today. That's going to be his story, right? Because it's pretty quiet from the Cuomo camp. But we shall see what the other candidates are going to come out and say today, from Zoran Mandani, Eric Adams, so on and so forth. I've been in touch with the Cuomo campaign to try and find out more. They're saying an announcement will be made soon. So we will follow that every step of the way. But for now, it's a roller coaster of a ride, and it's a long way to September and an even longer road until election night in November. But we're here with you every step of the way, breaking it down. That'll do it for Pop Daily today. I'm Dan Mannarino. We'll see you next time.